This will be one of the most major products Immutable has released in the last 2 years. So essentially, it is a passwordless wallet designed for gaming with frictionless user experience across both
Wait. How is passwordless? No password. That's nuts.
Yeah, we're very excited.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Between Two Layers. I'm Carly Reilly. I am, of course, here with our co-host, co-founder, and president of Immutable X, Robbie Ferguson. And we are joined today by Brycent. You know him from Twitch, from YouTube. He is the leading Web3 gaming Twitch YouTube streamer. He is also the co-founder and CEO of LootBolt, which we're going to talk about if you're not familiar with LootBolt. I love the fact, Brycent, that you hosted, it was the largest Twitch stream like of an individual creator, and it was you streaming Illuvium. Do I have that right?
Yeah, there was like a really interesting opportunity I host a Web3 Gaming Wednesday show every Wednesday, and I like bring on Web3 gaming founders, and we chat about games and give exposure. And it was like a really cool opportunity to, chat with Kieran and Illuvium, and, I'm a Twitch partner. So the opportunity came to have it on the front page. I knew they had like some really cool overworld stuff, which is like the game everyone's really anticipating. So we got to like have that on stream and on the front page of Twitch. And I think we ended up capping out close to like 13,000 people at one point in time and held it for quite some time. So it was cool seeing not only the big Illuvium supporters, but newcomers jumping into the stream. And a lot of people in the chat were just like, what game is this? And that's kind of what you really want to see as companies and games games and companies start to interact with people outside of Web3. So it was pretty dope.
Well, I want to talk to you maybe a little bit more about Illuvium and certainly about what games you're most excited for here in 2023. But before we dive into that, we do have to remind folks, if you are listening to this on an RSS feed, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, please go ahead and hit follow. If you are watching us on YouTube, go ahead and hit subscribe to the Immutable X channel. You can get more great content like this. And I know there's other tricks up the IMX sleeves this year in terms of content you can expect on the YouTube channel. So go smash the like button. I always turn into such a gamer when I'm on this podcast. Like I never say smash the like button on my other show. All right, well let's start. We're still in January here. This might air. It might be early February. But what is your outlook for gaming in 2023, Brycent, from your point of view? Robbie and I have talked about it a little bit on the show, but would love to get it from the player point of view.
Damn, you're putting me on the spot early here.
We don't pull any punches here.
Yeah, it's a big question. My outlook is that we're going to see some really dope games being made and a lot of demos, and maybe we're lucky enough or fortunate to get like a launch of one or two things. But I think gaming's in a lot better spot than what people try to make it out to be. I think the games that we saw last year that are struggling the most now are games that are heavily fixated around token price go up, and when token price don't go up, game doesn't go up. And gaming has been the one industry that's super recession proof. Gamers are still gaming and watching Twitch streams and buying subs and buying in-game items or skins, and now we call them NFTs in Web3. So I think that gaming's in a good spot, and I think that the games that are being built the right way are going to see some sort of value being built out in terms of how they curate and cultivate audiences. But it is a major evolution from like the world that we saw last year and years prior, where a lot of it was just this nostalgia around watching token prices go up and assets and like heavy speculation around like things like land. So it's cool to kind of see a shift back to reality. And probably my favorite thing as a content creator is last year you saw everybody in their mother was like trying to vouch and say they were content creators and they weren't really doing any content. Once the bear market hit, everyone just kind of ran for the hills. They didn't want to make content. They didn't want to stream. And it's like me and 6 other people still like grinding it out. So it feels like a very kind of grassroots, like early stage moment. So it's cool.
Yeah, what's the phrase? The tide goes in, you see who's swimming naked, kind of a thing. There were a lot of naked content creators out there. Is there a game you're most looking forward to in 2023?
Oh my goodness. So I have a couple. Like I'll talk about 3. The 3 games that I'm really excited for. Probably third on my list is a game called Grit. I know that Gala Games has been crushing it there. They brought in a studio that already was building out the game and the ecosystem, and they kind of partnered with them as the publisher. So I think that Grit being a Wild West battle royale, like a Red Dead Redemption, is going to be sick. And I mean, I make TikToks on it, and people don't see any difference between it being a Web 2 or Web 3 game. So like that's very like much exciting for me, knowing that I can have something that I can make consistent content on. The second one, of course, Illuvium is like one of my favorites. I think we're in a space where when you think of like what Pokemon has done for years and now having the opportunity to like revolutionize and build upon an expansive concept and like incorporate 3 different styles of games. Like me personally, I'm not a big land game guy, but the in-game moving around, catching alluvials, like that very much aligns with the type of thing that I would play on stream. And I've had some crazy long Illuvium streams. I remember I played the Auto Battler for like 10 hours on stream one time. And then I've had like a ton of 4 or 5 hour streams just playing the overworld. So I think that's like a game that's going to do very well. And then the last one, Wildcard. I don't know which chain that's being built on, but that game is really sick. It's like a combination of like a Smite and League of Legends, but you know, also providing like some sort of deck creating or trading card style. So those are like the 3 games that really intrigued me for this year. All of them are like somewhat different genres, which is cool because I know a lot of people think, oh, you know, when you're in gaming and you got one genre. I like to play a little bit of everything. It all depends on like the day of the week. I want to ask Robbie, what is his favorite Immutable game? Like what game would you play the most? Out of all of the games being built on Immutable, which game are you most excited to play? It doesn't have to be your favorite game on the list, but which one are you most excited to play?
Yeah, look, I try and not have, favorite partners, favorite children. I think there are some really notable ones. I've been playing a lot of Illuvium, particularly the Auto Battler, and was actually a massive TFT addict back in the day. So it's good to have a version of that where I don't feel bad about spending money on it. And I think they've done a really good job. Like I think that's kind of getting close to the quality that their Auto Battler has achieved. Obviously, it's a much smaller audience than kind of what they're doing with Overworld and with the collectibles game. I think that has pretty impressive potential TAM in terms of players. I'm going back to the fundamentals rather than what I enjoy. I would love to see extensions of that. And that's what I think is really exciting about the Illuvium universe. Maybe we're going to see literally a 2D top-down version of Illuvium, and you're catching alluvials. Maybe this stuff can be licensed. I think the thing that's really exciting about this is that the value of the IP and the economy can just grow over time. I am very much looking forward to some of the MOBAs that are being built on the platform. I was a massive League of Legends fan back in the day. And there's also a couple of, I think, casual games I'm super excited for. The social metaverse Invu just had 1 million wallets registered. They're building on IMX. They're switching over from a Web2 kind of centralized database-based economy. So I think that's probably one of the most major moves that a mainstream gaming company has made. So there's a few, and I think there's going to be many coming out over the next 12 months that the general bar for quality is just going to raise drastically. I think we're no longer going to tolerate sort of 2D experiences that are sort of crappy. The bar is going to get much closer to real games.
I love how you finessed that question a bit.
Can't take Robbie out of the founder of Immutable X role and thinking about it from that standpoint. Brycent, I know Robbie and I were talking earlier. Curious how you think Web3 gaming changes the way that creators like yourself make content or streamers make content. Does it affect that much?
Yeah, I think that you're given a lot of opportunity to find ways to create a sticky community using Web3 technology to do things that you can't do in Web2. Like, for example, if someone wants to watch my Twitch stream, the only thing I can really do is say, hey, you can support me by watching this advertisement that I'm going to roll every 30 minutes or, paying for a subscription. And okay, 10, 12 months, however long subscriber, you don't really get any reward or benefit out of being a subscriber other than the fact that, maybe you get a couple emotes or something. But one thing I've explored heavily on my Twitch channel is using a platform called rev.gg, which allows you to basically mint POAPs directly through your Twitch stream. People can claim those POAPs and then use them, for different things within your ecosystem based on what you provide. So for myself, I post a brand new POAP every single Monday, and that's our POAP of the week. And if you claim it, you get to get in an assortment of giveaways where I give away crypto and NFTs based on the games I play for that given week. So not only have I seen like my community become more sticky, but I'm seeing people who are finding, they're basically getting super excited. In the days where I miss launching the POAP, they're like, yo, what about the POAP today? We call them Beejin badges, and the Beejins are like my community. So it's really cool being able to leverage Web3 technology to provide some sort of proof of participation that can go beyond just sitting live on Twitch. One day I want to drop a free NFT collection, and having that POAP is going to be basically your whitelist pass to getting into that. So I do think that there are ways to leverage community-based tools on the blockchain or community-based badges and reward systems and mechanisms that create better experiences for your audience. And I think that, that's one area where Web 2 is going to really gravitate to what we're doing.
We've seen creators, I know you were mentioning earlier, Kagi and I think Jonah Blake, who have launched NFTs as creators. Like, have you thought about doing your standard, here's an NFT launch, or are you sticking with the POAPs for now?
I'm going to stick with the POAPs for now. I do think I'm going to do an NFT launch sometime closer to maybe spring or summer. And those POAPs will be like the entrance pass or almost like the whitelist to get on to actually mint the free NFT. I don't think like as a creator, it makes sense to do a paid NFT. But if you do a free NFT, the one thing you're going to do, if you source it correctly, you're going to get a list of people who are like your most diehard fans. And if you're able to, like, let's say you did a creator NFT with 1,000 mints, you get 1,000 people who are your diehard fans. And even if they're not like retweeting every piece of content, they're staying in tune and they're staying in tap and, they're active. You're going to run into a space where those 1,000 people are going to help you connect with the next 10,000, and not just 10,000 people who follow your Twitter. I think Twitter metrics are one thing, but finding people who are be willing to go out and purchase a product if you were to launch a product or support, your partnership with another brand. So I think that ultimately creators need to focus on how do you build up a small conglomerate of like super fans that are like your family or your community that you really can leverage to go out and do really cool things with, because that's what's going to lead to like more long-term value and sustainability. And the biggest issue I've seen with a lot of the current like market around creators doing like mints and things is very much like kind of surface level. It's all based on speculation, and you get people to buy on based on speculation. And a lot of times when you do something that's free, you get around that whole speculative aspect. And if people make money off it, then so be it. But you're not kind of forced to fight the constraints of being in a box and providing for a given set roadmap. You can kind of be as creative as you want and take it where you want.
Not setting up the dynamic out the gate of like, you've got to drive this much value back. You got to get the floor higher than where it started because you've set it up right. I want to get you both involved in talking about reacting to some current events. Brycent, you've been streaming the Bored Ape Dookie Dash game quite a bit.
Yeah.
What are you thinking of it so far?
So, and it's funny because a lot of people who don't understand like the whole connotations of apes and why, like when I got into space, I never really wanted one, was because, it sucks, but like being black in America and like in school as a kid, you get like, if you're in the wrong school or you're in a place where some kids are just mean, you can get called an ape joke. So when I came into like Web3, like I didn't want to be like associated with like an ape as my profile pic. And I didn't understand like the whole like connection, the deeper connection behind it at the time. And I was like, whatever, like I'm good. So like I always kind of faded it. Eventually I bought a mutant, sold a mutant. But the game was intriguing to me from the perspective of they were able to leverage their brand value to create, I would say, overall reward value and get people playing and sticky. Even though it's just a 3-week mini game, it's cool to see how microtransactions can kind of take place in a space where if you have the native brand value behind it, it can steamroll, the growth of a given product. And that's kind of what they did. And from my perspective, they made like $500,000 in just a couple of days off of the microtransactions in the game. Like that's pretty ridiculous. And for a company at that stage trying to figure out what is our larger path in gaming, they're getting a lot of like best practice feedback. So I thought the game's pretty fun. I like the competition more than anything. It's just a simple endless runner mini game. But I'm a big competition guy. If there's like a prize at the end of the tunnel, I'm more likely to be involved. But Robbie, I want to get your thoughts. What do you think about the game, but also the idea that how much does the Bored Ape brand impact people's willingness to spend on the game?
Obviously, tremendously. Like, I don't think with a play base under 10,000 people, you're having a hundredth of that revenue if they're not kind of very high-end fans of a known IP where this is kind of an exciting project and community. And so to me, this is just an experiment with distribution strategies and monetization strategies in gaming. I'm very supportive of sort of creating experiences for select people, so long as I think it has a base of broader appeal as well. And so to me, I think the only way gaming really makes a difference in Web3 is with mainstream games with tens or hundreds of millions of players. I think Bored Ape is in a position where they can absolutely execute on that plan. I mean, I think they have an IP that's well known. I think that the value of that is that you can reduce the cost of acquisition for players on multiple different experiences. You can kind of share ownership and get people to come try out these new experiences. So I think that this is probably just a small experimental step in what I hope is a broader play, or what I think, if they want to go mainstream, must become a broader play. There is definitely room for smaller player-based games that monetize very highly, but I think those still need to be fundamentally open, and those are generally driven by, you see this even in the games that Gabe Leydon used to build from Machine Zone, who's now obviously doing Digidaiku, which was sort of Game of War, and you had incredibly valuable whales kind of competing against each other. So I think we will absolutely see this monetization in Web3. It's probably been one of the most common forms of monetization so far. Personally, what I'm really excited about is how do we get people trading stuff for $10? How do we get hundreds of millions of players? And then that will all come as well. But those will always be the people who want to be the 1% best players in this massive audience.
I'm excited about what Yuga's doing here. I think obviously, they can get away with a very simple game because they're Yuga and because of the IP, and that's all true. But I do think broadly, right, what's happening is brands are saying, okay, we just need engagement, right? Like that's what we need. So you start with, hey, buy my product, you go buy it, you give me money, we give you a product. You then have shop to earn loyalty programs come out of like, hey, buy 9 lattes, you'll get a 10th latte free. And now where you see folks moving, and Starbucks is in part leading this way, is, okay, engage with our brand and we'll reward you. Yeah. Engage with the brand, and then down the line, you'll buy the latte. You were getting at this earlier, Brycent. And I think Yuga's really leading that charge. Like, hey, let's find these ways to gamify things to keep you engaging with our brand for that much longer, so that we can sell you our merch, or maybe it's microtransactions, but this is where all brands, gamifying experiences seems to be where all brands are going to have to move in this space in general.
I think so. I think that ultimately we're playing an attention game. As a content creator, one of the terms that I think is like the most hilarious thing ever is when people say, oh, this is clickbait, or, he's doing this for attention. It's like, there's not one brand that doesn't exist that does stuff for some level of attention. Only difference is, a content creator who's just making content for attention versus, a brand with millions of dollars and they're paying for attention. And both are valuable. And what we're seeing in Web3 is finding a way to basically commoditize attention through the value that NFTs can provide. And I think that, Bored Ape has been probably the most instrumental in kind of continually dangling the carrot to continue to keep that I would say that attention like prevalent. I mean, even this game, it's like they knew that there was going to be a large secondary market, and media would take it and say, hey, this game costs $2,500 to play. I mean, you can make a hell of a narrative in a YouTube video off of why would you want to pay $2,500 to play an endless runner if you don't know like the behind the scenes context of like, who knows what the value of the NFTs that come out of that $2,500 runner game actually are worth. And this is kind of like a very niche game for a set of holders, but that's the thing, it's people finding really interesting ways to keep people's attention. And I think they're doing a really good job at that right now. Of course, this isn't, to be able to know what their larger or bigger other side ecosystem will be for that game. But it's interesting to see how you can take a group of people who may not be gamers and create mass hysteria as long as the rewards are high. And it kind of falls back into that, like almost the play to earn ethos that we kind of are shying away from. But the biggest difference being, non-inflationary tokens, and also a brand value being so strong that it can kind of garner that type of, I would say, user attention.
Speaking of buying attention, and speaking of Gabe Leydon, we have the Superbowl coming up, and the Game Leydon Digidaiku limit break commercial that's expected. What do you guys think of this?
I want to know Robbie's thoughts. Like, when you first heard this guy raised $200 million and he's going to now buy in like was it $5 or $8 million Super Bowl commercial? I mean, without context, I thought it was like the wildest stuff ever. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
It's. I mean, look, I know Gabe. I think he's a great guy. Is a clearly a very critical figure in sort of mobile gaming development and performance marketing. And so he made Machine Zone. That was a very successful company that made massive mobile games that had huge performance marketing funnels. He kind of invented modern performance marketing. So I think if there's someone to successfully pull off a Super Bowl commercial, it'll be him. I think he has a good understanding of how do you create enough value in a game such that you can appeal to people who want to play very casually and to the biggest whales. And he was quite famous for successfully monetizing down this end with these previous mobile games as well. And I think that's actually a very useful skill set for Web3, because a lot of the categories of assets people are building, land, etc., are essentially luxury in-game assets where you're giving people power or pieces of an economy. Understanding how to make that actually valuable and deliver on those promises, I think, will be an important skill set in building a successful Web3 game, obviously built off the back of millions and millions of regular players. So I think it's cool. We'll see how it goes, but I'll certainly be watching.
They're doing a free NFT mint during this commercial. Do we know what the use case? Do we know anything more about the NFTs? Brycent, I don't know if you know.
I know nothing about the NFTs. I know there's like it's the game is like a part of a much larger mint, and that's kind of all I've come up with. There is like a whale that like reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I don't trust anyone to play on my passes, so if you play on them, I'll pay you something." So I'm playing for some guy who just has way too many passes, and he's like, "I'm not a gamer, but I like Bored Apes." And from my perspective, I was like, "Yeah, now I have a way to make content on it." So it ended up being like a really cool relationship.
Very cool. Let's also talk about what's going on in China right now. They shut down millions of World of Warcraft players. There's a dispute between Blizzard and NetEase. I haven't fully been following this, and by the time this airs, who knows where we'll be with this story. But Robbie, maybe would love to get your breakdown on what's going on and your thoughts here.
Yeah, so a contractual dispute between Blizzard and NetEase, where NetEase refused to sort of relicense and therefore they suspended access to World of Warcraft in most of China. I suspect it'll be republished at some point in the future. I don't have any thoughts on that dispute. What I think it does show is that based on the nature of games and based on the inherent limits of centralized servers, when you spend money in Web 2, there's nothing backing that value at the end of the day. And these people who spend thousands and thousands of hours and tens of thousands of dollars, this game is their life for many people. And it's really important that we protect those assets and that they can have continued access to it. And so I think a perfect example of this is, even if this happens in a Web3 world, you still have your assets. Someone else could go in, find a new version of the game, a similar version of the game. You could offload those assets to jurisdictions in which it's still live. It doesn't solve all problems, but it fundamentally solves the problem of incentive alignment, where if the economies and game developers are building something, and the only way they succeed if people are still playing that game, it's growing over time, and people are trading, then they're going to do everything in their power to kind of maintain and grow that access. So I think it's a really good example of, again, the very thin ice on which Web 2 gaming is based, when we sell people what is a very significant part of their lives and part of their income. And they deserve better rights if we're going to do that.
I agree with that. I think that like the biggest issue is you pour hours and hours into these games and then boom, someone just wakes up and decides to pull the rug from under your feet and you're like, wow. So what about that level 99 Druid Master that I've spent all of my time building out and I can't even use them anymore? It kind of sucks. And hopefully they come to some sort of resolution and the gamers can start playing again. But it just goes to show you don't really own anything. It just sits on a server until you actually own it and you can verify it on the blockchain. But I think if anything, it adds more, like it's a plus one to, the ethos of why Web3 gaming is not only here to stay, but it's going to be so prevalent over the next couple of years.
Let's turn now and talk a little bit about LootBolt and what you're building there, Brycent, and want to dive into the advice you're giving and how you're building out programs for the brands you work with. Start by just giving folks a sense of LootBolt.
Yeah, so one thing that we learned very early on was that games, especially in Web3, are struggling to not only build sustainable communities, but reward them in a way that is, one, on-chain, but two, align with like the goals they're trying to set. So, for example, there's tons of games, but there's not a ton of ways that games can leverage their communities to outwardly market or leverage their communities to do actual work and put it into like a almost like a quest or bounty like format where these community members are working together, but also competing against each other to earn prizes in either it's native game tokens or NFTs. And one thing we realized was like, that's a world that if harnessed correctly could be, super valuable. So Bolt ended up becoming like this content creator tool that first I used it in-house to pay people to like, edit my YouTube videos and create graphic thumbnails and stuff like that. But we realized like, hey, this could be a larger thing for games to just leverage in their communities, especially in Discord. So we built out a payment system on top of Discord that allows you to pay out in multiple blockchains, and using that payment mechanism to basically deploy bounties or future of work opportunities to your community directly in Discord. And the reason why we started there is we know that Discord is where all of the users or where all of the community members live. But the biggest issue community members have is they don't really have a way to progress within a given ecosystem, especially as they're waiting months and years for games to launch. Like, how do you find your best content creators if they're not making content consistently, or your best writers or editors or researchers? So we wanted to make a world where you could leverage, Bolt for whatever your needs were from a community scaling standpoint. And it's been really fun up to this point. We surpassed about 23,000 users to end last year. And we've worked with, really cool projects on IMX and other blockchains as well. Most notably like Guild of Guardians. Wildcard also loves it. They've been, running and deploying bounties, and more recently Ready Player DAO. So it's been cool kind of finding a use case. I think the hardest thing about like building a startup and figuring out ways to make it useful is how do you monetize these sorts of things? So coming up with the right monetization strategies are definitely the next step, but it's a lot of fun to build, and it's cool seeing it add value to different projects.
That's awesome. Do you have a fun anecdote or any specific examples of projects, maybe even an IMX project, activations you've done with any projects to shout out?
Yeah, so like one of the ones that we did with Guild of Guardians, it was just like a simple like community-based bounty, almost like a meme, where we had Guild of Guardians members like basically crop their Guild of Guardians PFP on their head, and on the heads of their family members, and then post pictures to the bounty. And it created a lot of stir, and the best ones, they actually earned a little bit of GOG token. So that was like a really fun use case that like helped improve some community sentiment. A lot of their people got involved and had a good time with it for sure.
So speaking of Guild of Guardians, I know Immutable just recently announced the GoG partnership with a number of major esports teams. Talk to me a little bit about this, Brycent. Would love to get your reaction, and Robbie would love to hear you talk about this a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we're partnering with 8 of the world's largest esports teams. So Cloud9, Fnatic, Navi, Ninjas in Pajamas, NRG, SK Gaming, Team One, and Team Liquid. And they're all having in-game characters based on their esports brand inside of Guild of Guardians. So essentially the largest esports partnership in Web3 gaming to date. Guild of Guardians is super excited. I think the cool thing is that it's not just marketing, it's actually how can we create pieces of these brands inside the games that can live on and then act as a beacon to those audiences to come and try it out. And I think we'll see this as a marketing strategy that becomes quite popular in Web3 gaming is how do you take IP that represents an audience or a fan base? How do you give value to that fan base? And in exchange, they come and play and try out the game. So yeah, it's an awesome experiment. I'm really excited about it. I know a lot of work has gone on behind the scenes. But Brycent, keen to hear what you've heard from the sidelines as well.
Yeah, I mean, when the original announcement happened, I was like super excited because this is the first time we saw any sort of like esports exposure to a Web3 project in I would say a culturally endemic way, like skins. And oftentimes some of the biggest issues that Web2 organizations have, I know Sentinels, which is a big organization, recently announced they were leaving Fortnite. And their biggest issue was they didn't see a world where Fortnite was providing enough opportunities for their esports org to survive in the game. There was no skins, there was no partnerships. So they elected to leave. So it's cool to see that esports orgs are already gravitating towards a Web3 game. And it's cool that was GOG. But I thought the really important piece of it was getting their communities exposed to what it could potentially be. And in the early stages, people are going to be abrasive. People are going to, try to claw back and fight it when they don't know much about it. Like anything with information, when people don't know and they haven't read up on it yet, they're going to be a little bit more taken back. But I think ultimately it's great for the space in Web3, but it's also great for Web2 because it's setting a precedent that when games look to enter the space, not only are you going to go and look to work with projects that are going to allow you to have some sort of ownership and rev share over the assets that are sold in your game potentially, but also that you're going to look to work with and gravitate towards blockchains that are doing great things. I think that Immutable falls in line with like what's happening from that front, and being able to say, hey, Immutable led project brought the first real big esports integration into Web3. I mean, that's a big notch to have under your belt. Excuse me.
You both have done a lot and continue to do a lot, and I think really have a mission to onboard new people into Web3, and you both use gaming to do that. I would love to talk about, maybe Brycent, hear from you, what are some of the biggest obstacles you think still in place for gamers joining the space? And then Robbie, for us to talk a little bit about the Immutable Passport and what you guys are doing there as just one technical step to try and break down some of the barriers to joining this space. So Brycent, maybe starting with you, just what are some of the biggest obstacles you see?
I think the biggest obstacle isn't even a Web3 issue. Like when people talk about, oh, we need to see good games, like, and I've tweeted about it, but it's like that's like the bare minimum in terms of like everybody knows we need to see good games and we need to see proper marketing. But the biggest obstacle is sentiment associated with bad actors. I mean, before Web3 gaming even had its prevalence, you look back and you see guys at FaZe Clan and major Web2 content creators like shilling, crypto projects and bad NFTs like Save the Kids and things like that. And they basically destroyed, the first interactions that gamers had with crypto. So NFTs are associated very closely with crypto, which doesn't help. And that's where those negative connotations come from. And then you have things like the Luna collapse and then FTX that just like throw us over the edge of like bad actors kind of drowning out what's happening in the space of good. But, ultimately, when you add in a lot of negative sentiment, people are going to be abrasive because the first thing they think of is, oh my God, I'm tired of these NFTs. You compile that with Steam saying, oh, we don't like NFTs and Minecraft, which are like games that have built reputable brands with hundreds of millions of gamers. You're going to run into some backlash. So I would say overall sentiment is like the biggest issue. But I think over time, as great opportunities for games come up, like maybe a big MMO launches that people jump into, or, it only takes one viral moment on TikTok. So I don't think that it's something that'll last forever. But right now it's just a very abrasive industry because it's very much in the hands of Web2 publishers, and they understand that their business models are going to be affected deeply by having to give value back to gamers. So I think it'll change for sure.
Robbie, why don't you jump in and explain what the Immutable Passport is that's launching, I think today when this airs, though always a little bit of a game of when things air. So it will have recently launched or be launching today.
This, we've buried the lead a bit. This will be one of the most major products Immutable has released in the last 2 years. So essentially, it is a passwordless wallet designed for gaming with frictionless user experience across both.
Wait. How is passwordless? No password.
So it'll be email login with a one-time password that gets emailed to you. And it's a self-custodial wallet. So we use a split key NPC in order to allow essentially OTP, but also users can migrate to their own private keys, and we never have custody of keys. That's essential. Immutable will never vitiate security. I think that's kind of paramount to how we've stayed alive for this long, let alone been successful. And the most important thing is that it's dedicated to gaming user experiences. So we've really optimized for, hey, if you're signing up to a mobile game, if you're signing up to a game and you've never played a Web3 game before, you don't have any ETH in your wallet. If you have ETH in your wallet and you want to try a new experience, how do we unify all of these potential sort of pathways that a user could end up trying a Web3 game and make it as seamless as possible? So there's a bunch of features to this. It'll have a bunch of SDK integrations with many of the major game vendors around the world. But we're really excited to roll this out as an offering for our games. I know there's been a lot of pounding on the doors for a very, very long time. So I assume when this comes out, we're going to have a bunch of major press release around this as well. But this will be, I think, a really essential component that's missing from the gaming ecosystem in wallets today.
That's huge. Like, that's nuts.
Yeah, we're very excited.
Just logging in with no password at all. I don't got to do anything crazy. Like, that's huge. That saves me a ton of time.
Yeah. And I think really importantly, the plan is if a user gets, say, $10,000 worth of assets, start to educate them about, well, hey, this is how actually private keys work under the hood, etc. So I think the idea that there's going to be one simple user experience to solve for everything probably doesn't acknowledge the reality that there's going to be many different segments of users in the way that, whales are going to behave very differently in Web2 games. And our goal is kind of, when you're starting out, it should be as seamless as possible. But we should also think specifically about, well, hey, if a user already has Ethereum, just let them pay with that if they want to, or how do we let them use a wallet that's sort of on different roll-ups and unify these. So I think that the goal is to provide an experience that is seamless no matter what you are, what roll-up you're building on, or what you have in your wallet.
When I was first reading about this, I was like, oh, it's a self-custodial wallet. Like I couldn't wrap my head around some of the features you were describing with that. Or I'm sorry, it's a custodial wallet. I assumed that IMX was just custodying things.
Yes.
So that's wild because it feels like it has so many of the benefits of a non-custodial. I
Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of advancements in like split key MPC architecture, where you can now have sort of some information stored client side, but sufficiently enough elsewhere to make it recoverable. And the goal really has to be, this has to be ridiculously easy to use, because I mean, gaming is a game of numbers. If you're going to have a successful game, your customer acquisition, customer acquisition has to be low enough. Your retention has to be high enough. You're killing your CAC and timesing it by 10 to 50 when you have the onboarding we do today in Web3. There's no chance of a game going mainstream unless you have such insane value and viral sharing and community, which is, I think, why this has all been paramount. Because if all your friends are playing something, you're probably willing to jump through a few hurdles to go start the game. But if we're going to get people downloading this en masse, it has to be ridiculously easy to use. You can't be required to set up a new wallet if you're switching from web or desktop or console to mobile. It's got to be a unified experience, and it's got to be secure. Otherwise, no major brands or games will use it, first of all. And if they do, the price will be paid 12 months down the road when, you know, the hundreds of billions of dollars that will end up being deposited in these is lost.
Brycent, a fan favorite on this show, are just your classic day in the lifestyle questions. So I want to do a couple of these with you. I hope you don't depress me as much as the others do in terms of, I've interviewed like a lot of Australian engineers who are like, I'm up at 5 a.m. and then I do 2 hours of boxing. So Brycent, what is your morning routine?
My morning routine, I try to block out like all of my stuff. Like I used to do to-do lists, but they don't really work too well. So like now I actually just set time blocks. So normally I'm up 6, 7 a.m. First thing I do is gym.
Okay.
I know it sounds like a little cliche, but that's the only time
I believe you fully. I'm just depressed about my own inability to wake up at 6 a.m.
Oh my God. At first it was bad, and then like your body gets used to it, and then like my testosterone started increasing because I'm waking up earlier and working out every day, and I'm starting to feel like macho man, bored ape, like without owning a bored ape. So I'm like, you know, I'm feeling great. So like I hit the gym, come back. After that, I'm making myself breakfast. I'm a big yogurt fan, so I'll do like some coconut milk yogurt because dairy does not sit well on my stomach. So I do coconut milk yogurt and like 3 eggs and some fruit, and then I start my day. Like I'm making content for like 4 or 5 hours, and like I have blocked off times where I'll take 30 minutes and just spend 30 minutes replying to tweets, 30 minutes writing out tweets for the day, 30 minutes just like videotaping YouTube shorts and TikToks so I can send them to my editors in the Philippines, and they start editing those videos, and I get them back tomorrow and I post them. So it's like my morning routine is kind of like a cluster of self-help and, you know, getting myself well and then making content. And then, you know, early afternoon or around 12 o'clock, that's when I really go ham on like, you know, business related stuff.
And what time do you go to bed to get up at 6 a.m.?
Oh my goodness. Sometimes too late. Normally I try to be in bed by like 11, and then I'll sit on TikTok for 30 minutes. So I'm like probably knocking out around like 11:45. Last night I got to bed around like 12:30, 1 o'clock because I didn't eat dinner. So I was like scrambling to make a meal like last minute, but normally I'm in bed by 11. It's hard to wake up if you don't get proper sleep, but I'm like an old man. After a certain like amount of time, like even on the weekends, when it's 11:30, 12, like I'm already like getting ready to doze off. Like waking up early puts your body in a space where all you want to do is sleep after a certain amount of time.
Do you have any, I don't know, rituals, things you like to do if you're prepping for an especially long stretch of making content, if you're streaming for 8 hours, whatever, one of these crazy stream things you do?
So my daily ritual is I'm a big fan of tea, but not the bag tea. I like loose leaf tea. So I have like this really cool tea maker, and you can put loose leaf tea in it. And every morning I make myself some loose leaf tea, and I kind of sip on that throughout the day in different moments. So that's like my one like regular routine. Now, if I'm gonna go for like a long stream, I'm not a caffeine guy. Like I'm not a big coffee guy. So normally it's just I'll have a couple of like liquid deaths, which is just like you would think this is like a drink or like a seltzer or something by the way it looks. It's literally just water. Like not even sparkling water, just regular tap water. But I like to call it a vegan seltzer because it looks like it comes in a weird, you know, style can. So I normally have a couple of those ready, and you know, that's it. I just get on there. I'll have my music ready. I'll start vibing out. And the stream actually gives me a lot of like, I would say energy. So once I'm live and the lights are on, like we're good to go for the next 3-4 hours. And I stream every day for 4 hours. So my body's gotten used to it. At first it was kind of difficult because you're balancing that and being an entrepreneur, but it gets easier over time.
What is your number one piece of advice for content creators that want to start mixing in some Web3 content, maybe to their Web 2 audience?
Hey, that's a tough one. I would say if you're trying to mix it in with your Web 2 audience, the best thing you can do is state the obvious stuff that everyone talks about. Say, hey, you know, most NFTs are bad. You know, most of these projects are going to fail. I'm testing this out because I'm curious and I want to see what you guys' thoughts are. I'm a gamer already and, you know, we make gaming content, but what if the games over here are actually good? We've only heard bad things, but let's try to test it and see if there's something decent. So make it seem like you're like kind of, you know, hand-holding them into the content instead of, you know, we're just going to talk about this game and hopefully no one knows the difference, or we're going to talk about NFTs. I think making it about gaming the most, or whatever content you create, is going to be the most important part. And then just stay consistent. Like, you don't have to have it on your main profile. Like most Web2 guys, I would probably recommend making a second YouTube, or not a second Twitter, because Twitter is just, it's only good if you have one. But a second YouTube or a second TikTok where you're like, hey guys, I'm exploring this new concept of gaming. I've always wanted to talk about it. I don't want to force this on anyone, but if you want to check it out, and you can kind of plug people into your other. I know there's like been a couple of YouTubers who've tried it. Mystic 7 was one who jumped heavily into like the Web3 scene at one point. So I think that the best thing you can do is like be open, honest, and transparent, and you won't run into as many issues as most people would think you would run into. Like, a lot of people are open, especially if they trust you and believe in your content. They're gonna at least check it out. Okay, final question. Who are 3 maybe Web3 influencers, Web3 gamers that you think are doing good work in the space that you want to shout out that our audience should go check out? Some other content creators? Other content creators, let's do this. It could be games to check out, books to check out, content creators to check out. What are your recommendations for this audience? And it can be more than 3 now that I've expanded the question. Oh, so I would say I've kind of talked about them a lot, but I think Wildcard is like my go-to jam. Like when I'm playing a Web3 game right now, it just is, it's so smooth. And if you're looking for a battle royale grit, also I even like what is it called, Eden Brawl, that Illuvium that is gonna pop on Immutable. I think that one's gonna be pretty interesting. If you're thinking content creators, I would say like my favorite 3 in the space right now. I like Crypto Stash. He's pretty good, even though I don't like that he has crypto in front of his name. I think it like alienates him and forces him to be stuck in solely a Web3 audience. So I like Stash. I like Spike Reacts. He's pretty cool. Jonah Blake does some dope stuff. I don't think he doesn't make video game streaming content. He's more like a business gaming content creator, which is still cool because that's a niche that hasn't been really too explored yet. And a newcomer, this guy, I think his name is Shamgar. He's actually pretty cool. He makes a lot of gaming content, so I would say check those guys out. Brycent, thank you so much for joining us. This has been so much fun. It was a pleasure as always, Robbie.
Thanks, Bryce. I'll see you soon.
Thanks all. Till next time.